Camera.
Hey everyone. I put my computer in a different spot, so I'm going to be a little closer than normal.
Brad, is that your home office or your library or something like that?
Yeah, this is our home office and library, whatever. Yeah, yeah. Got a lot of windows, so that's nice.
Yeah. Very nice.
And it's snowing outside a little bit, so that's not so nice. Well, we need snow, though.
Yeah, we had a bunch Monday.
Yeah.
It's cleared off now.
We're headed to Portland and Salem tomorrow. I've got my fingers crossed.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah. A memorial service, actually, for a classmate at 2 o'clock in Portland and a grandson's birthday down in Salem. So,
oh boy.
hope we can make it.
Are we supposed to get inclement weather?
Yes. Yeah. And actually, for Portland, at least on the newscasts that we've been watching, they said snow level, of course, you're not in 1,800 feet when you're driving into Portland, but Cascade Locks, I don't know what the elevation is there. And monsoon type rain Saturday with heavy wind on our way back. So I figure if we can make it over to Pendleton tomorrow, we'll make it to Portland and Salem. Getting home.
Well, and the wind will be from behind, so it'll be scooting you along. You'll do better on your gas mileage.
I'm okay if it snows as long as I get it on the ski hill.
All right.
Brad knows what I mean. Yeah.
We need it.
Yeah, we need it on all of our ski hills.
Yeah, poor
Recording
Anthony
in progress.
No, this morning 4 inches. So
that doesn't cover those 2 foot rocks.
yeah, we need a little bit more than that.
I just saw the new little sign there that said this meeting is being recorded. Give your consent. Is everybody seeing that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, it is 3 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Tamara, I'm sure will be checking in soon because I know she's planning to be here.
Oh, she's on now.
I'm here. I just stepped away for a minute.
She's the one inducing seasickness in some of the rest of us.
Sorry. Sorry, motion sickness. Sorry. I'll stay put.
Okay, I think we're all here. The December. Where are you going, Tamara? If anybody else is checking in on this live stream, we're all okay. We really are. We're just a jovial bunch here. Call to order. The December 8th special meeting of the Governance Committee is called to order. Mr. Secretary, please proceed with the roll call.
Please respond when I call your name. Dixie Lund.
Present.
Tamara Mabbitt.
Here.
George Mendoza.
Present.
Brad Stevens.
Here.
Mauricio Valerio.
Present.
Madam Chair, a quorum of the committee is present.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is announcements. Board Secretary Burford has some announcements to make. Chris, please proceed.
Thank you. We ask those participating in this Zoom meeting to please mute your microphones when not speaking to reduce background noise. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, you can use the chat feature in Zoom to communicate with our AV specialist or Ella. Phone numbers for Ella and the AV specialists were provided in the meeting announcement email sent last week. To provide access to the public, this meeting is being live streamed and the meeting recording will be accessible from the board's webpage until the next meeting. Lastly, we invited written and oral public comment for today's meeting. No written public comment nor requests to give oral comment were received. That concludes my announcements.
Thank you, Chris. Does anyone on the committee have any other announcements? Okay. I would like to thank the governance committee members for agreeing to convene for this special session to complete our agenda that was so heavily packed from October. So that concludes our announcements. Our first agenda item is to receive oral comments from members of the public. As Board Secretary Burford announced earlier, we received no requests from the public to give oral comments. So we will move on to our next item, which is approval of the minutes from the October 27th, 2021 meeting. Does anyone have any comments or corrections to these minutes? Another sterling job by Ella. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Board Chair Lund, I motion to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you, George.
Second.
Okay, there was a second from Mauricio. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Secretary Burford, please conduct our roll call vote.
Trustees, please respond yes or no when I say your name. Dixie Lund,
Yes.
Tamara Mabbott,
Yes.
George Mendoza,
Yes.
Brad Stevens,
Yes.
Maurizio Valario.
Yes.
The trustees have unanimously approved the motion.
Okay, thank you all very much. And thank you, Ella. We will now receive an update on the EOU Foundation from Tim Sydell, Vice President for University Advancement. Tim, will you please proceed?
Thank you, Dixie. And I've asked Emily Adams, our Executive Director of Philanthropy, to join me for this presentation so that she can correct me where I'm wrong and also provide some added color commentary as to what we're doing. So we work quite a bit together on foundation and development activities. I'm going to try to share my screen with you and get into the right mode here. And hopefully we can make this work. If I get to the right screen, and there, now I can see. We had to test this morning, so Emily and I worked on making sure we could share the presentation and the screen so you could see, what's going on. So thank you for having us here today, as we wanted to provide a little bit of an update as to what we're working on right now, and then what our plans are for the future with the foundation. So we'll go through. We have kind of limited time, but we are happy to take questions at the tail end of this, and provide any feedback that you respond to any feedback that you may have. So the foundation, if you weren't aware, was established clear back in 1964 by some local folks. It is a 501c3 public nonprofit organization, and its mission is really to support the mission and vision of the university. Under the umbrella of the foundation is the Alumni Association, the Athletic Association, and the Oregon Agriculture Foundation. We have assets of around $21 million in our endowments, about 400 different programs, funds for programs, scholarships, and grants. This last fall, we provided around $800,000 to EOU students for scholarships. Recent projects we've been involved in include not only the new turf football field with the beautiful logo on there that I love because we made it as big as we possibly could, but also the new track and field facility, the new Fazioli Grand Piano, which is over in Loso Hall, and even recent or previous McKinsey Theater updates that we were involved in. That's just a snapshot of projects from the last few years. Engage, enhance, and invest is basically the three key words that the foundation board worked on developing as we went through a process, really taking some advantage of COVID to develop a mission and a strategic plan for the foundation in alignment with the Ascent, and working with our trustees and board members. They came up with an entire strategic plan that we'll touch on and give you a report out on how is it going. So a year later, after this was adopted, so this was adopted in 2020, in 2021. During the last homecoming event, the foundation met in its annual meeting, and Emily and I provided an update on progress to date on that strategic plan. To give you a little context about what we're talking about, our priorities include campaigns, projects, gifts, and planning. And there's quite a number of projects in the works. One, campaigns. We are working on a campaign for around a $3 million baseball softball complex on the south end of campus. We're testing about $1 million of that to be raised by philanthropy. The university is putting in the other $2 million. This is, you can see on the slide at the bottom, there's some renderings of where the field, what the field would look like. The field is slated to be located next to the current softball field. So it's, if you're thinking about campus, it's over on along Geckler or C Avenue, across from Burney Park. Right now, our teams are playing. The softball team is playing on campus. The baseball team is playing off field. Another larger project we're working on is testing out a $29 million comprehensive campaign. We're calling it the Centennial Campaign. This would go along with a goal of 29 estate gifts that we would put on the books as part of the campaign. Estate gifts are long-term gifts that come to fruition usually after the passing of an individual. And then we have some shorter term projects that are underway currently right now. We are actively fundraising for support for the Ag Entrepreneurship Degree Program. We have a lot of local businesses and regional businesses that are very interested in this new degree program and how it applies to the region and how it supports our students. And so our process there has been to talk to a couple of major basic grantors who are providing resources, startup funds, if you will, for the Ag Entrepreneurship Program. And then we're looking at longer term funding for that program, including support for scholarships, for students, internships, as well as for potentially even for faculty positions as well. We have an ongoing project with the stadium sponsorship. We would love to get a field name out there. It's community stadium, but we would love it to be, Wood Grain Field, or maybe it's Lund Field, Dixie. You and Ed want to pitch in on it. But to get a name on there, we think it's really an immense opportunity. If you think about the number of folks who come to our campus to attend not only EOU sporting events that are taking place on that field, but also LeGrand High School and the school district. And then when we bring in folks, it's really neat. We get a lot of folks from the region who come and are able to play there as well. I can't talk enough about the change to put turf on that stadium field, and what it enabled us to do, what it even enabled our high school to do. The high school was able to practice during snowstorms as they went on for their statewide championship here just a few years ago, and they wouldn't have been able to do that. We kept saying, if we didn't have that kind of a field, they wouldn't have been able to make that practice happen. So it was wonderful to see those things happen, and that's a field that's getting used all of the time. And then our annual fund is a big one. That is a campaign. It is an annual campaign. It is something that we're prioritizing, something that Emily and her team are re-envisioning actually as we speak. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Emily, anything else I left off here?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, and Emily, may I interrupt for a moment? George had a question for you.
Oh yeah.
Tim, real quick, and I apologize if I didn't catch it the first time. When you write down testing 1 million or testing 29 million and 29 estate gifts, can you just further explain that?
It means we're having introductory conversations with donors around the concepts of the campaign. So we're talking with some lead donors. We're presenting to them the campaign pitch, if you will, and having conversations with them. We're testing it also by running it through some of our systems that Emily will talk about in a couple of minutes, where we're able to track down information about potential donors to the foundation and have that conversation with them as well. So we're talking about it. Sometimes, particularly in a project like a Centennial campaign, where you have a number of projects, we hear from our deans, we hear from faculty on campus, I hear from other vice presidents, boy, Tim, we really need money for X. And we take that out and we do focus groups and find out, is that something that people are, I'm really excited about that, or would we find a champion? You present these items to small groups or these focus groups, and what you're really looking for is to see if there's somebody in that room who gets really excited about it, becomes a champion. and says, we've got to make that happen. We have to have scholarships for that kind of student. We want to be there. We want to make it happen. You say, great, you've got something to work on there. We've also pitched ideas out that somebody says we need money for another, some kind of special whatever center on campus, and you put it out in front of the group and you hear roughly crickets, frankly, where people just don't get excited about it. We've had projects in the past where we've presented and we found out that where our donors were excited was about giving scholarships, around making sure that students had access to an education. They weren't as interested about professorships, fully funded professorships. That didn't connect with them. But boy, when you talked about the ability to get into that classroom and be with that professor who changed their life maybe, then they're really passionate about making sure students have that access. So that's what we can bring then. That enables us to build out a campaign with better messaging.
Thank you.
Projects, and Emily, you can touch on this. One of the first things she noticed was that in order to get good gifts, we needed good data. And so she set off on getting a couple new, you want to talk a little bit about what iWave and Gift Clarity are doing for us, Emily?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so and when we talk about a campaign and possibly going into a campaign and what does that look like, and most institutions or organizations would do something that's called a wealth screening on their donor database, and that takes into account not just capacity but affinity to give, propensity to give, things of that nature. And so iWave is sort of the tool that we used to drive data out of our donor database to measure those areas. It also creates a tool for us to use on a daily basis. So for example, if we're having a conversation with someone and they say, you should meet with Tim Sydell. He's really someone that we think that could potentially give to this project or this campaign, or we can go ahead and type in his name and just a little bit of information, contact information that we may have on him, and it will pull from a larger several databases that are public record information and provide us with some more information on that individual. And then Gift Clarity is another software system that it's more of the human component, and it takes that data that we've gotten back from iWave on our donors and it puts it more into like a strategic plan or a long-term plan. It also provides us with a short-term platform to use for donor management. It also gave us the ability to say, this 29 million, based on all the data that we got back from iWave and the donors, this 29 million we think is something that you can achieve, but here's what you're going to need in order to achieve that. You'll need this many gift officers and back end support and things of that nature. So it really gives us a lot of just important information and data that we can use to really determine if this is something we can move forward with, and even just on a daily basis, it's very functional for us. So it's been a really positive tool.
Thanks, Emily. A couple other things we're working on include regional advisory councils. We've started pushing out, and then of course COVID hit, so we've had a little bit of a struggle getting meetings happening in these different locations. But in talking through the strategic planning process, we heard more and more from trustees and others that they wanted an opportunity to engage, but they just couldn't. They couldn't always be coming to LeGrand for a meeting, quite frankly. And as we talked about it, we found there was pockets of people who are very interested in supporting Eastern, but they wanted to meet more locally. And so we've looked at regional advisory councils, and this is in our strategic plan, but that's a way for us to increase engagement. So instead of having one centralized foundation board that is just 15 people, we're looking at 10, potential regional advisory boards, or 5 at least is in our plan for the near future. But now we're engaging, in terms of folks who would be on little planning councils, 50 more people, not only a centralized foundation board, but 50 more, if you will, smaller boards out in the region, and those are going to bring in another, larger group, another set of people who are coming to the meetings. So that extends our reach. So we're looking at Boise. We have that one underway right now. Adding Portland next year. We're looking at a couple other locations. We're also updating our bylaws.
May I stop
Sorry,
you
Dixie.
for a second? I'm sorry on that one.
Yeah.
just to avoid confusion with the regional advisory councils, I don't know how many of them are still in existence with the regional centers, but I'm wondering if maybe there could be a little different terminology there, somehow include the word, I don't know, foundation advisory councils or something like that.
Actually, yeah, they are foundation advisory councils. Yep. And yeah, we're very aware of that. I don't know if there's any of their advisory councils from in existence anymore around our regional centers. I think they've all gone away. But yes, we do actually refer to it as the foundation. At one point, we were trying to name them Philanthropic Regional Advisory Council, and that just didn't roll off the tongue, as you can tell. So we narrowed it down, and we found that people we were working with just kept calling it. We call them the RACs, or Foundation Advisory Councils, and so that's what we're narrowing it down to. So we're hoping to get those up and running here, especially as we start to emerge from the pandemic. We're updating our bylaws through the foundation. Really had made updates and tweaks to them, but hadn't really overhauled them. So we took advantage of a couple of our trustees who are attorneys, and Emily coming in and being able to look at things with a new set of eyes. Had our staff go through with a fine-tooth comb, and we're in the process of updating our bylaws, which will, for example, change the name. Instead of have a president of the foundation board, it will be a chair of the foundation board. In many ways, that's just in alignment with what we actually have even with the board of trustees. It helps eliminate that confusion. But also some other structural changes we needed to make to update the bylaws. So that's happening this year. We've been working on it for a little while. And then staffing, we'll touch on that in the next slide, but there are some new hires we're very excited about, and I know Emily is excited about as well. So when folks ask who are there, first we want you to make sure that the foundation does support staff positions within university advancement. So we use resources that the foundation graciously gives us to hire 2 staff positions and support 2 staff positions within university advancement. But right now, the staff makes up of me, VP for University Advancement. I generally get in the way. And then there's Emily, our Executive Director of Philanthropy, Tyler Dubsky, our Major Gifts Officer, and then 2 positions that we took that were in existence, but we realigned them and reorganized them. So that credit goes to Emily for pulling that together and saying, hey, we really need this to be focused. So we turned those positions into an Assistant Director of Stewardship and Scholarships. Again, if you're aware, we pulled all of the foundation scholarship processing and selection all through, that used to be run through financial aid. We've pulled that into advancement and into the development office. And then we just hired a person that she started December 1st. And then our new Assistant Director for Annual Giving and Alumni Engagement starts January 3rd. So we're excited to have those 2 positions up and running and on board here, and that'll enable us to do a lot of great work. We have a foundation fiscal coordinator, Jerry Silvera. If you don't know that name, you may have heard it, but she's been on staff for a while, but she does a great job helping coordinate all the financials around the foundation. And then my assistant, Lori Baird, who helps fill in gaps, coordinate meetings, set up board meetings, and that kind of activity.
And just real quickly, have info line announcements already gone out on the 2 new assistant director positions? I'm just asking because I want to make sure that they got a welcome from the Board of Trustees.
I'm not sure if those have been sent out yet or not. Emily?
I don't believe that they have. I saw something go out for Susanna, but I don't think that was info line specifically. So Dixie, I'll add that to our to-do list.
Yep. We want to make sure they show up for work, and they're actually here. No, we're excited. So, gifts are a big item that people always want to know. What's the bottom line? Are you actually out there raising money? This is all great. You're doing all this planning, but show me the money. And this is a quick list of major gifts over $10,000 since July 1, roughly up to our current base. And you can see that we have scholarships in here for nursing, business education, football directly, mathematics, plus an estate plan. So we have a lot of athletic scholarships in here, but you can also see there's a new $12,000 music scholarship, significant support from the Oregon Ag Foundation for the Ag Entrepreneurship degree program, And then a gift that, Emily, you want to talk about the recent gift we received for $100,000 that came in through the annual fund?
Yeah, that's really exciting. And this donor kind of likes to spread the wealth, if you will. So 20,000 of that is actually going to his scholarship endowment. 20,000 of it is going to athletics and being distributed amongst the 10 sports. I know there's 15, but track really encompasses like 4 or 5. So amongst the 10 sports evenly, so they each will receive around $1,800. And then 20,000 is going to the foundation annual fund. And then 40,000 of that is going to music. So that's really exciting for everyone.
Yeah, extremely beneficial for us. So we have been doing things. We have been bringing in gifts. Again, Tyler Dubsky and Emily have done a great amount of work in the last several months. These all get done behind the scenes. We get gift agreements in, we get the funds in, we start using them. But there's a lot of work that goes into each of these. Is essentially a legally binding contract between the foundation and the donor, and we have to make sure it's mapped out and doable. Many times people like to make their scholarship so specific that you can only give it to one, there's only like one student in Eastern Oregon that could go to. So sometimes it can be finding a needle in the haystack, but we also find that by making sure we have a couple of layers of criteria, we're able to give it to students and make sure, because ultimately we want to get the funds into the hands of the students where they can benefit from them. So funding the future and enriching lives is the theme that we've been using for the foundation itself on its strategic planning process. There's 3 key areas, as I mentioned before: engage, enhance, invest, and we gave this kind of an update to the board at their annual meeting. We've tweaked it a little bit since then because we're always working on it. It's something we look at on a regular basis. So strategic plan, our update, engage. One of the questions that came up actually with this governing board coming into fruition and being called trustees of Eastern Oregon University was we've had the name trustees attached to the foundation for many years, since 1964. So there was a question about should we change the name, and we went through a long process with our foundation committees talking about it, getting input from folk. We looked at different names and different terms, and ultimately came back to the realization that we have foundation trustees and we have governing board trustees, and all of the other names we came up with just didn't quite fit and it seemed to make sense. So we weren't hearing that there was a lot of confusion about it. I think initially there were thoughts there might have been, but as this governing board has come into being, and the foundation is out there, we're not seeing too much conversation around it and too much issue around it. So in consultation with the foundation trustees, we're going to set that aside for now. We're just going to continue working with trustees. Expand. This is not only increasing the number of our regional, like we talked about, our regional advisory councils, but making sure that on those councils, there are people from underrepresented regions, cultures, and our online alumni. We have a lot of alumni who are people who didn't go to campus. So when we send them a picture of the stadium, as much as I love it, team will remind me that, Tim, this is great, but a lot of our alumni we're sending this to have never been to that stadium. So we got to remember that. And what is the connection they had? Well, most of the time that connection is faculty. They had outstanding faculty, and that's where our alumni and our on-campus and our online alumni have a similarity, is they've had the same faculty members. So we are looking to make sure that we expand that and try to get to 50% of all of our advisory councils having a good, healthy dose of diversity on it. And we're making sure we're actually going after, that's great, we want this person to be on here, but we want to make sure we recruit an alumni who is maybe an online alum. And then decentralizing that idea of developing regional advisory councils. So we're at 1 right now. We want to go to 5 by 2025. Emily, what did I miss there?
I don't think you missed anything.
Right. I've been listening to you. And she laughs. Under investment, we want to plan for the upcoming comprehensive Centennial Capital Campaign, as you can see. Giving is expanding levels of our President's Circle. This has been on Tom's list for a while. We've had a President's Circle. It was originally called the President's Club. For folks who give $1,000 unrestricted is what it originally started out to be. That was a long time ago. That was 20 years ago. And we need to look at changing that up, having different levels, having recognition at different levels for everybody who's giving to that President's Circle. Those are you might hear people talk about their bread and butter donors. Those are our bread and butter donors. And then staffing up, including a plan that not only takes advantage of the 2 staff people we have, but how are we going to fund the fundraising? How are we going to come up with the resources to bootstrap this campaign moving forward, so that it's a partnership between the institution and the foundation, and we're making sure if we're going to do a campaign, we're going to adequately staff it and make sure it happens, but also not shift burden around. I think one thing that we always are cognizant of is not shifting burden onto students, and certainly not expecting students to pick up the cost of it. But how do we make that happen in a partnership way? The other 2 pieces of our investment plan include legacy, increasing the size of legacy society, these are estate plans. These are folks who've included us in their estate planning, and then employees. We took a look. We're looking at testing right now. We're talking about 100. If we can get to 100 regular donors, it's up and down year to year. That's about 20% of, if we roughly say 500 employees. If we could get 20% of them to give on a regular basis, we'd like to see that higher. And that may be that was one of the things that triggered our conversations around having staff overseeing annual fund and how much we could leverage our current employees to be participating in giving. All right, I'm jumping around here. Under enhance, we currently have around a little more than 265. We've added just a few, as you saw on our list. Scholarships, we want to have an increase in our number of funded scholarships. And we're setting that number. We want to be realistic about it, because with every scholarship comes a list of criteria and some work that has to be done to award that. We want to make sure we're not only bringing the money in, setting up the scholarships, but getting the funds out into the hands of students. But that's a definite need. That's always the top of the list. Internships, we're testing right now. We're talking about perhaps having 40 fully funded internship funds, so that as we work on programs like the Rev Center, where we're engaging students in the community and the region to do internships, that those can be fully funded, especially for those students who, for them, it's a choice of getting that experiential learning opportunity or not being in college. And they have to make the choice. I'm going to quit my job, but then I can't afford college. So how do I get the experience? And so we don't want to put them in that situation. How do we make sure those things are funded? And then more. We recently, Emily, you might want to talk about some of the projects that came in our recent meetings with the deans.
Yeah. So, and we talked a little bit about it, the ag entrepreneurship programs, sustainable rural systems. We've just been talking with them a little bit here about what their priorities are and really what their needs are. And then, taking that back actually with, I've had a few conversations with some of our donors or potential donors here of what that could look like, and really trying to put a model together for them, and not just think, short term, like what are my current needs right now, but what does this look like as the program grows? What will those needs look like? Because we can have those conversations with donors of this can be a long-term support program that we put in place. And a lot of our donors are wanting to see that. They want to be able to support something, not just right now, not just this year, but what does that look like long-term for them? And so it's having those conversations and getting the deans and the faculty to kind of look big picture, and then also to be able to, put that into writing or put that into something that we can present to donors. So, and it's been a good process so far.
For so many years, we've been just focused on the here and now, that putting together a plan that reaches out into 2029 and getting people to think big can be a challenge sometimes. People are really still thinking about what do I need tomorrow? And you say, well, think bigger. What might you need in 5 years? And you see people stop and it's like, wow, that's a fantastic thing to think about. What could we do in 5 years, and what could we do with adequate funding? And making sure that we can share that story out. So next steps, what are we doing? Well, enhance. We're using our themes. We are enhancing. We're working on capital funding. We have this program for support, as Emily just talked about, and scholarships. That's still the top need and the top giving area. We want to invest in major gifts and on our annual fund programs. And one of our pieces of the ascent, there's 2 key items in there for the foundation and for development in advancement, and that is, we want to be in a comprehensive campaign, and we want to increase alumni engagement. And so those are the 2 two needles were moving. It's like where are we making progress on the campaign, and are we making progress in alumni engagement? How are we tracking that alumni engagement? And we can go into depth about conversations we've had around how we can utilize the alumni magazine, The Mountaineer, to measure engagement. How can we deliver that in different formats to different age groups of our alumni and track their utilization of that publication in print versus online, and thinking through our younger alumni who maybe don't want to engage with a printed magazine, but maybe they would engage with more short-term or smaller pieces that might be on Instagram or other social media platforms. And then engaging, lots of engaging. One of the key elements of fundraising is in-person meetings, and that's what we got to really get out on the road and do. And that's been hampered by COVID, and that's always been a challenge for us. But we're doing more of that. We've had great conversations with a lot of people in person. And then campaign planning, as Emily mentioned, a lot of that infrastructure work about what's going to work and what's not going to work. Then how do we keep it relevant? And that's by doing these updates, going through our process and our list. And seeing what's working and what's not, and then making adjustments. So with that, we can stop and see if there's any other follow-up questions.
So Brad here, I don't have a question, just a statement. I'm just impressed with the progress that the foundation has done. And I think 14 years ago, I came on the foundation, and Dixie and Richard were on. I think at that point we were at 11 or 12 million or something like that. Mm-hmm. I see you're at 26, so that's just amazing, the wonderful progress that you've made. So just congratulations, and keep up the good work. Thanks.
It's just to correct, it's about 21. So we'd love to be at 26, but we're getting there. That was the last campaign when Tom was on the foundation board. We got into that. Of developing our first comprehensive campaign and finding out where the funds came from and what funds we could go after. So this is one of those items that grows as the institution grows and the needs grow, and people want to say, hey, can we get resources for that? And where can we provide that that margin of excellence? Where can we get that extra resource to make the difference for a student to be able to go to college or to graduate from a university, or to get that piece of equipment or that new baseball diamond that everybody wants?
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Emily. That was very informative, very helpful, and I know that we all echo what Trustee Stevens just said. We're very impressed, and congratulations on the work that you've done. We're excited for the new people that get their feet wet very quickly. So
I know Emily is.
Yeah, that she is.
I'm very excited. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Next, we will receive a trustee recruitment update from Tim Sydell. So we'll shift hats and ask you to do that, Tim, please.
Back on it. And Chris can jump in here too about our existing trustees, but we do have folks who have applied or reapplied to serve on the sorry, I'm shifting gears to serve on not on the foundation board but on the governing board. And I currently have, I think, a list of 3 or 4 people who we're trying to get to apply, ideally by the end of this week, for the process that will go through the February legislative session when the the executive appointments would be made. These positions all would not start until July of 2022. But of course, the sooner we get the names on, the sooner we can start working with them and engaging them. If we don't see them happen in February, or if they don't get on the list in February, then there'll be another opportunity for them to come. Usually it's in May that we would see the legislature convene again. And we've had people stair-step through that in the process in the last few years too, where they were picked. We added some people in February, we added some folks in May. The end goal is to have a fully a board full of trustees, or a full board of the entire 15, including our faculty, staff, and student trustees, our at-large trustees. We've looked at several. We've got several names. These names went through. We did go through a process, if you remember, where we did take names in. We visited with folks. We met with the board chair and the vice chair. Had a discussion with them about who to bring on. We had recommendations coming from trustees with folks that we then engaged. Dixie, I engaged you on one trustee potential candidate, and engaged Richard Shavs on another one. So we've been able to touch base with folks and find out some more background and then have a meaningful conversation with them. I think the key is there to understand that what it takes to be on the board, and it's not just it's not your average group that gets together periodically and you get a lot of things handed to you. So it's one of those where there's that intent from the board to be engaged. So that's, Chris, is there more you'd like to add there that we need to add on?
Certainly, I can just update. I want to thank the 3 trustees who originally applied in July and had to reapply in October for getting yours in. That's Dixie and George and Cheryl. So yours are in. We've had 3 more trustees apply, and those are now in. So Danny Bailey is applying for his second 2-year term, and Maurizio is applying for his first full term because his original term he was filling the rest of the term of David Nelson. That actually means he's got a potential another 8 years on the board, depending on his enthusiasm for the project. But 4 years would be what this term would be. And then Cedric Rio has applied. His eligibility as a student trustee is going to expire, but he is applying to be an at-large trustee. And as such, he would be the only trustee we will have had who is a recent graduate and going through that transition. So I think that's really could be a really valuable addition. And his application got in today. The deadline for the February round of Senate approvals is this Friday. So we're hoping we'll get a few more in. I know Tim's got some folks that he's talking to. Noteworthy that Karen Gomez will not be reapplying. She told me she feels that she's got some real. It's a key point in her career where she has the opportunity to do sabbatical and a few other things that could really enhance her career, and so it seems like a good time to take this fairly significant responsibility off the plate. I've reached out to Faculty Senate asking if we to get the word out, to get hopefully a goodly number of faculty who express interest or actually apply. I don't think that will happen by Friday, so we would be hoping to get that faculty position in for the May Senate approval. I think that's what I have on my update for that. Dixie, you're muted.
Any questions from other trustees for either Tim or Chris before we move on? Okay, thank you. Sounds like we're making good progress toward having a full complement of board members again soon. That's exciting. Okay, we will now move on to our 2 discussion items. We'll begin with the annual board evaluation questionnaire discussion. Secretary Burfer will introduce this topic. So Chris, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. I covered this in some detail in the cover sheet for this topic. There's a fair bit of history on how we got our current form. Essentially, this committee met 4 or 5 times over the course of a couple years to develop the type of form we have now. And that was adopted in 2016. So while there have been relatively minor changes here and there, almost every year. The forum, the types of questions being asked and the information being gathered has not really changed. More just the manner in which we do so. At the time, I thought that was pretty good assessment that the committee had done. I was really pleased with the conversation about what sort of things the committee was asking about and what kind of information they were gathering. And it's useful to have responses over multiple years to kind of track trends. At the same time, this is a forum that's been around for 5 years. And this committee really hasn't done a thorough, that kind of process of thinking deeply about the forum and what they want to ask. So I at least wanted to put out for consideration for the committee whether that is something you would like to do. In other words, over the course, not just this year, but maybe the next, look at a variety of reference materials on these things and sort of dig in on it. I'm not necessarily saying that's recommending that, but I wanted to make sure you were aware that that's an option for you in terms of your work over the next year or two. The committee is obliged by Board Statement number 8 to propose to the board a form for adoption by the May meeting so that it can be used immediately thereafter. So the reason I couched that in terms of kind of a multi-year project is you're probably not going to get that done by February. And February would be your opportunity to propose a form. So between now and February, we do have time to make relatively minor adjustments, but perhaps significant, so that the form is and the way we're processing it fully meets the committee's needs and expectations. I did include in the briefing material some comments we had gotten about process, and I think in terms of things like making sure that trustees get an acknowledgement when they've completed the form, making sure the trustees will have a copy of their submission that they can refer to months later when we discuss the material. All are technical fixes that Holly has assured us we can do relatively easily. So to the degree that the committee is interested in making those kinds of changes, I think we could easily have that in place in time for a recommendation to be made at the February board meeting. In fact, some of those are process things that aren't really about the content of the form itself. So some of that could even be done subsequently. So that's my sort of overview of the topic. And the current form is in your materials. And I think I offered some potential discussion questions. I'm happy to answer questions. And this is a discussion item. So hear what kind of concerns come up from your own conversations with yourselves.
Hi, Chair Lund, if I may. So I read through this, so I'm still a newbie. Just to put it out there, I think that the form itself is fine. I see a value in keeping the same form, but with some minor changes. And maybe that's because I'm still getting up to speed with the workload for the trustees. But the form itself really, I don't see as problematic, but I like the idea of maybe making some minor changes to it. I also, just from experience, like for evaluations and performance, it's nice to have a consistent form so you can measure year to year and you're comparing like for like. So that was kind of my overall message. And for some of us who have missed a few things, I think we'll do better. And I don't know that changing the form would change the board's participation and completion of the form. So anyway, just my thoughts initially.
Thank you, Tamara. I was one who was surprised that at our board retreat, I heard that mine never got turned in. And so that threw me a little bit because I had taken the time to fill it out, but either I missed a submit button or Ella said something about the computer that I was using didn't handle SurveyMonkey or something. So I'm hoping that we can get a bigger response from the group. I would agree with what Tamara just said, that and what Chris said too, is that changing it right now is probably not the best use of our time. And also, we don't have the ability to compare responses from last year to responses from this upcoming year if it's all changed around. So just my thoughts on that too. Others? Brad? George? Mauricio?
Brad here. I think it would be also helpful. It's going to be very helpful to know. I was not sure when I sent mine in if it got recorded, but apparently it did. But I wonder if there isn't some sort of follow-up that the chair might want to do, say 2 weeks ahead of time, and say, "Hey, Brad, for God's sakes, where is that form? Are you going to fill it out or not?" So I don't know if that's being a little bit too Cub Scouty or something, but I think that might be something we might consider doing.
I'll go back to my original thoughts when we were in the board retreat. Just simple and easy, something that we can do that even gives a confirmation so that it's understood. And if it goes to Ella, that's great. Or if it goes to Chris, that's great. But it's done. And then if it's electronic, the other part is if we did it in a meeting or if we did it as part of a work that we do at the end of the day at a board meeting, and we have 30 minutes designated or 20 minutes designated, and we're asked to complete it. Could be in our small group committees or it could be in our large group, but just build it into the machine and then try to make it succinct. And then the follow-up we can do 3 months later or 4 months later as you kind of go over the data and find out things that are working well or things that aren't working well.
And this is Maurizio. One more thing that I like, when I reread those questions, I think that the language that we use in the question, so I agree, keep it simple. I agree to give continuity so we can compare throughout the years, apples to apples. Some of the language in this evaluation is a self-assess language, and some of these really speaks to the board at large. And I think more clarity in that would be helpful. Am I talking about myself or am I talking about the board in general? So those questions, most of them start with the word "the board" and then ask. So if I am asked to express an opinion, especially as new board members come aboard, it's kind of so anyway, a little bit of the language that will give clarity to who are we addressing with that particular question.
Okay, I think very constructive feedback from everyone. Chris, are you comfortable with doing some relatively minor tweaks, especially picking up on what Mauricio just said so that it's clear to the board member that they are doing a board evaluation, not a self-evaluation?
Yes, that might involve changing maybe some emphasis in the introductory language, describing language. I am looking through the questions, and as Mauricio said, most of them do either say the board or board members do X. We have a number 11 that says the talent, skills, experience, knowledge, and expertise of individual trustees are being effectively employed. So I think that's still a collective question, but I can see how a person might think of that more on the personal level. The one that is personal is the last one, which is I am proud of what the board accomplished last year. So yeah, I think we can think about how we frame it up for presentation, people to fill out, so that we emphasize that this isn't even though you may be drawing from your personal experience, this is a board evaluation, not a personal evaluation.
Excuse me.
In terms of simplifying it, to me that either suggests fewer questions or shorter questions, or a different format. I know George had suggested that, yeah, he's got his hands up, perhaps doing it as a, setting aside time for people to do it during meetings. That is a way of simplifying. Go ahead, George. You're muted.
I was going to just say my idea of simplified is I think you already have questions that are pretty short and succinct and multiple choice options. So I kind of like that. And if you want to make a comment, you make a comment. So I do feel like it could probably be done in 15 to 20 minutes. And if we really wanted to be deeply thorough, you could give us 30 minutes and we'd probably have 10 minutes to spare. But either way, if we got it done in a meeting, then that to me is like, it's there's no escaping kind of deal. You'll get it done. And this question of did they turn it in or not turn it in, and all the reminders, and I thought I did and I didn't. I mean, to me, that's what I'm trying to look for, so that we have like just it's clear, it's done, it's accomplished.
Yeah. We could build, and they somehow put some time into the May meeting, maybe around lunch time for that. We can dig in on that a little bit more, looking at that agenda.
And if there is a back to that receipt or some kind of a something that tells us it's done, and it tells you or it tells Ella it's done, so then again it's like the error or the human error is hopefully verified in a way where it's the system doesn't allow for too much of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's something we're ready to work on implementing.
Question on timing, Chris. Are you thinking that if we follow George's suggestion of doing the evaluation at the last board meeting of the school year, which would be in May, that there would be sufficient time to have summary data available prior to the retreat, or at least at the retreat?
Yes, I think typically we've actually been doing it after that meeting, doing it by electronically or by email. So I think if we did it during that meeting, we wouldn't have any problem having the data ready for the retreat in August.
I had one other question, and it had to do with the, it's on page 2 of the cover sheet. And it was about in the middle of that page where it says additional trustee critiques of the form. The second bullet there, evaluation be reflective of the actual work and decisions made during the evaluation period. How strongly do trustees agree with the outcomes? How inclusive, respectful, thoughtful were the deliberations? I don't have the questionnaire open in front of me right now, but do you feel that the questions that are there are responding to that particular bullet point?
I think the gist of that point is that at least one of the questions, perhaps more, really focus on what was the work done that year. And I think the questions largely are written to be more generic. Does the board effectively monitor the university's academic performance or the university's fiscal circumstances? Now, those are questions about what you've done in the last year, but it's not a further level of detail along the lines of, were you satisfied with the process by which the budget was adopted? That might be, more along the lines of what did you do this year, specifically. We do have the question at the end. I'm proud of what the board accomplished last year. Well, at first, the question sort of suggests an answer. Yes, I am proud. If you're not proud, that sounds like a problem. But it's also just very general about what you got done, rather than talking, for instance, about, that last sentence of that comment sort of suggests how well did the board apply an equity lens? Well, the board doesn't have one yet. But so I don't know if that's a question of a matter of adding a question to the form, or whether it's just a different way of thinking about the questions that are already there.
I think the reason that section, that bullet point, just kind of stuck with me is that sometimes I'm not sure, looking back, that we really appreciate or even acknowledge and understand what all we did accomplish. So without going back through minutes and things like that, if there was just even a list, a brief summary or something of the major accomplishments, that perhaps board members would feel more honest in responding if we kept question number 10 there.
I think that's a great point. If trustees are going to finish in 15 minutes, that's not going back and going over past agendas and flipping through past minutes and saying, oh yeah, we did all that. So perhaps having staff produce a sort of bullet point of, these were your action items over the last year. These are some of the discussion items you've engaged in that may lead to future action, something like that, would help trustees when they're doing the assessment itself. In other words, not require changing questions, but provide more framework in which to think about the questions. I think that's something certainly we could do.
I think you do that already. I've seen the list, that you do, and it is, when I first looked at it that one time, I thought, my gosh, we really did accomplish a lot. So that would be helpful. Are there any other comments from other committee members? George, you're unmuted. So do you have something you wanted to share?
No, I think it's good. The only caution I have is just keeping it succinct. And if there are things that help out, like Chris is saying, if we want to have a year in review document that helps us, that might be a nice thing. I don't want to make them have to do a ton of work myself, but that's probably a nice thing to have a year in review if it helps us to really reflect a little more deeply. So, but just keeping it to a 15-minute to 30-minute type of task is something that I feel would work out well.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before we move on? Sounds like we do have maybe need for a little bit further discussion in January before we have something to take to the board for the February meeting. So this item will return to this committee in January. We'll come up with something that can be an action item and will be taken to the February board meeting. So, thank you all. Okay, we've now gotten to the final agenda topic, to receive feedback on the 2021 board retreat that was held at the Country Club here in La Grande, and to discuss the planning for the 2022 board retreat. This topic will also be led by Secretary Burford. So Chris, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Lund. In my summary, I mentioned at the beginning about the charter listing a number of things this sort of examples of things this committee does, and one of them is matters pertain is actually in the agenda, reviewing the agenda for the board retreat. Well, in practice, reviewing the agenda for the board retreat is proved to be, well, it just isn't something we've really done, because frankly, it gets pulled together in July and August, and largely in conversation with the chair. But in a broader sense, and I refer to this a little bit in the other examples given, a major focus of this committee is maintaining the health and well-being and successful, efficient performance of the board, and with an eye toward building healthy board culture. And obviously, the retreat is a big piece of that. So we do annually talk about how the retreat did and what our aspirations are for the next one. And that's really the two parts of this discussion. First, thinking about what went well, what maybe didn't go well at this retreat we just had in August, and thinking about what we want to do for our retreat next August. I'll note that typically we do plan these retreats in locations that are quite some distance from Union County, and that requires reserving conference rooms and making arrangements fairly far in advance. So it's good to have this conversation in November, or in this case, December, while the memory of the last retreat is fresh, and while there's still plenty of options for making reservations and such for the following year. By March, April, you're starting to lose your options. So that's really part of the reason we talk about this now. So, as you know, we had to be adaptive with our retreat this year, and frankly, the one last year as well, in that we had plans for remote locations that then we ended up meeting on campus, or this time at the country club. The technology side was really challenging. I have reviewed the Zoom recording from the retreat, or audio recording, or whatever it is we've got, and you can't hear a thing. There is no audio for the first day, and that's what Bobby was not hearing. There was no audio that you could really hear anything. So don't want to do that again. But at the same time, when we travel, whenever we leave campus, frankly, so far we've always moved to an environment where there was less technological support than we have here. That's not to say there isn't great value in traveling, but we just have to do it knowing that the technological capabilities may be rather limited. Now, we had some discussion, I saw from the minutes, thinking about our last meeting, about the question of remote access to meetings. And we are required to have remote access to regular meetings, of which the retreat is one. However, that doesn't have to be by live stream. It doesn't have to be that technologically demanding. And so that can be the way we've done it in the past, which is by having a phone number you can call into. So technology is not an insuperable obstacle. But I just note that because that was a pretty obvious issue with this last one. Maybe I'll stop talking and actually get your feedback about the retreat, what you thought worked well, what you'd like to see done differently, that kind of thing.
No, George had his hand up. Go ahead, George. You are muted, George.
Thank you. I was impressed. I like the, I'll just say the relationship side of it, the rejuvenation, doing skeet shooting, having a nice meal, having a time to be around each other and talk outside of the meeting. So the affect side of it was really nice. And so, I would keep that anytime we go over visions, values, strategic plan, annual updates, focus and priorities. I mean, those are all things that we need to hear and discuss. And I felt like there was a lot of good topics. I would just say too, if we go somewhere, which is fine with me, I don't mind going to Burns, etc. But I also think, a next step would likely be to get to Boise or to get to Portland or to get to Hermiston or to get to Tri-Cities, areas where we're trying to recruit, and also areas where we're trying to reestablish relationships with people from those regions, and then having a night event or having some kind of let's get you back and meet with you, and if you want to meet the board, and we can support with some level of relationship or some level of foundation work that takes place with fundraising. Like, to me, Boise is one of your strong markets. Hermiston and Tri-Cities is another strong market. We have a campus and a satellite also in Portland, and use us as your instruments once in a while to help reestablish connections and relationships. And besides that, the priorities that we've already listed are great. But to me, it's really a time for us to get to know each other and get all the interpersonal side. To me is very important. And that interpersonal side to me helps with better decision making and more supportive decision making at the policy level or the structural level.
Other comments?
I support the comments already made. So it was a terrific event. I enjoyed it. Happy to go back to La Grande, but other places, and use the board retreat as an opportunity for outreach and connection might be a way to justify the investment for the added expense if it's outside of the area. And it was trap shooting, George. Skeet shooting is a whole different thing, but maybe we should do trap shooting again. I think it was really a good event.
Let's concentrate on your shootings categories, George, would you? One comment that I need to make, I love all the questions. I love the Dean's presentations and involvement. It was really inspirational for me. And if going farther away will diminish the chances of involving some way, somehow, other staff and whatnot, then I would say it's very important to continue to have those kind of high level thoughts. And so maybe that needs to be balanced between distance and involvement.
Have them come. Have the deans come.
So I read it. I agree with what everyone said, especially the chance for us to get together. But the other one is the community outreach, which I think has been really important. And we have a little bit of a challenge going to Burns and driving through John Day. And I don't know how you can possibly get those two groups together, but they're obviously both important. And I don't know if you could stop on the way to have lunch or something at John Day and then go to Burns or something. Anyway, that's just one of my thoughts. But I think the outreach to these communities is important.
I was thinking about the technological challenges that Chris mentioned, and I'm wondering if trying to limit the distance so that we can have more staff available, but perhaps looking at the Blue Mountain campus, both in Pendleton and in Hermiston. And we've been to Treasure Valley before, but back to Ontario. So I appreciate what George is saying about trying to capture the Tri-Cities again. That was my area when I was an advisor, and I'm sorry that we don't have as much going on there now. But perhaps just strengthening that sense of community with the community colleges in our own area would help alleviate some of the technological challenges, because they have the technology that we need.
Mauricio, again, one quick note. We have a new Cyber Mill Cafe in Seneca, Oregon, between Burns and John Day that has connectivity. It's not very big, but it's there and it's working. It's a super cool thing for the community. Just a thought.
That's great.
My hometown area. I didn't grow up in Seneca, but I grew up in John Day, so I saw that in the paper, and I was excited to see that. So
there's a great golf course at Sylvie's between the two.
Yeah.
And, the fellow that's put that together has been a great, very supportive.
Gosh, yeah, we could maybe ask for a discount and see if he could be a foundation donor.
So we actually did do a fair bit of work planning the Burns John Day one in the spring of 2020. It wasn't obvious right away that by August we still wouldn't be able to do things. And I'll just say that the plan was that we would have the afternoon part actually in John Day, then travel down to Burns for an evening reception, and then have the morning meeting in Hines. And that's how we were that's how we were going to cover both with one trip. Although, you know, I hadn't really thought about what the technical challenges would be in having the meeting really in two completely different locations. So that's great. We could still do that, so reactivate that plan. But I am also intrigued by the suggestions of more populous places. I recall Cedric saying, I think at our last meeting, that he thinks we should be recruiting more in Tri-Cities, that he was completely unaware of the institution until almost too late. I am the last person you would want to ask on the cabinet about recruiting and that sort of thing. I'm happy to say I have virtually nothing to do with that. So my opinion is in no way informed. I just note that. The Boise suggestion, others are interesting. So,
can I quickly ask? Just Tim might know more about this. Tom might too. When boards meet at, I'll just say, hotspot locations where there's the most alumni, or there's more of the stream for students, has that happened, and is that proven to be really successful when that happens, or do you know much about that?
I can add in, if you're 17 years old, would you like to go to one of our board receptions? And frankly, no. I mean, most high school students are not interested. I'm sorry, I love you all, but that's just not exciting to them. The reason why students, when you survey students, you find out when they're 17-year-old, you know what they know about? They know about the Division I schools, because they have much significant. I'm sure he probably didn't even know about Whitman as well, which is even closer to him, and probably about fewer schools. We have many students who don't know, about Eastern, and if our objective is 100% coverage, that's a different animal. So bringing them, no, probably not much in terms of the age group. Influencers, yes. Alumni, say please, we'd like to come over and meet the board. We have seen where people do want to do that, and so that's where you get mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles, and others who then may go back and say, hey Tim, I just met with the folks from one of the trustees from Eastern, and you should really check out what they're doing. That can work, but also there's a lot of the connectivity sometimes in a place like Burns is better than a place like Boise. Just depends on where you're going. If you go to we've done foundation events in Walla Walla and Boise and other places, retreats, and found that sometimes the connectivity wasn't even as great, because it depends on the setup of where you're at, what location you're at, and do they have the technology to do it. Sometimes it's a hurdle there, and you go to a small town and yeah, they can make it happen. that's really probably where the board wants to have the most, what is our objective of having the retreat in a different location? Do we want to try to influence in our own region? Or is there a reason to go to a different location like a Boise or a Tri-Cities to have it? We have regional centers all over the state, as Dixie knows, and so pulling students and alumni, quite frankly, pretty easy. If we were in Portland metro area, we have a lot of students in that area, a lot of alumni who have never been to our campus. We have a lot in Salem at our regional center there. We have a lot in Roseburg, so we can go all the way down to Umpqua Community College and do there. That's quite a trip for everybody, though.
I'm sure that our foundation will be happy to host us in our building in Roseburg. I can make that happen.
Oh, there you go. See?
And we have good technology there. So
now that may be worth doing, right? Now we're putting trustees and trustees together. That could be fun.
Okay.
Well, Chris, I'm not sure that we have narrowed down the discussion well enough, but I think we've all heard a lot of great ideas, kind of all over the board of ways to approach this. So, and that's where the energy is. So that's exciting to hear. Yeah.
Well,
So one comment I would make while the committee's together, because this is my bias. Now, it's one thing under COVID in terms of technology and such. Generally, I would say I would not worry about technology for a retreat. The intent of a retreat is a personal, in-person activity that is not driven by structure of a meeting in a meeting room, if you will. We want our trustees there in person. That's why we have a retreat. Otherwise, we just would set up another meeting. So I don't take that much into consideration unless, of course, we're in the middle of COVID. And if we're still in the middle of COVID, I would say we'd do it at Eastern where we have the capability. And then on a lighter note, I would just say that I have figured out how to do both the board evaluation and fun event. We will get an escape room, and if the trustees do not escape within the allotted time, then we've also done the evaluation of how capable you are to serve and work together.
is this going to be in a meeting?
Don't make it one of those escape rooms where people die or whatever.
we could schedule it in hole in the ground. We all be at the hole in the ground, and they have to solve the thing to get out of the hole.
Sorry to digress there.
No, I think this is great. My sense is that there's real value in traveling, unless it's just, a global pandemic gets in the way. We could do a little work and come back with some ideas. Another thought I had about engaging with influencers, movers and shakers. Probably our best example of that would be the Ontario trip. But part of what made it work that way was we were very much focused on asking those people a specific question and getting their answers. How can EOU be of more service to your region? Now, so when you organize the event around that, then I think you get more of that. And yet, I will say, well, at the meeting, we had lots of VIPs engaged in the conversation. That was probably our worst attended reception, Tim, would you say? It wasn't, there was almost no one showed. So, you get what you get. And the other thing about having to make arising thematically is you do have to have the follow through. So it can't be kind of the flavor of the year for this region or that region. But I think we've got enough to work with and come back. I don't think it's really an action item for the committee, but we might have some more ideas to just a little more form to shape to it for at our next meeting. See, George's got a comment here.
I'm just kind of repeating what I said out in the beginning. That's all.
Great.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Sorry about that. When I hit the chat button, I turned off the recording for a second or two. Okay, we didn't miss anything. It's not on the agenda, but I thought I would just mention to you the email that we sent around with Chair Shabs' suggestion that we have split each of our regular meetings into afternoon, evening, and morning. We've got a response from a lot of you. It's generally positive. It's a little more of a scheduling challenge, but so far it's encouraging. And I think my personal thought is, I mean, I'm very conscious these days that we will have a significant turnover of board membership. And that means we're going to have, 6 or so people who've never been on the board before at our August meeting. And so the more we have chances in that year for social interaction, getting to know you stuff, the more quickly we can kind of maintain the healthy culture of the board and sort of integrate new folks in. My other thought about this upcoming retreat is keeping that in mind. I think basic orientation could be a significant portion of the retreat. I do orientation with trustees already, but and I'm sure there will be competing ideas, but I'll just say this, doing it as a group with experienced trustees and new trustees together might have some merit for a significant chunk of our time. All right, that concludes my talk on that topic. Thank you.
All right, thank you. It was a good discussion, I believe. We're finished with our agenda for today. Are there any items or topics that any of the committee members want to make sure we get on the next committee meeting, which will be in January 26th, I think?
Brad here. This is just a general topic, but I'm always impressed with the foundation and fundraising. And there, of course, all members of the foundation are expected to be, I think, part of the President's Council, or whatever we call it, President's Club. And our board has never discussed individual donations of board members and I think we should do that. I personally know a lot of us have donated and have scholarships and things like that, but I think it's something that it should be part of, and I know we've been kind of sensitive about that issue, but I do think it's something that trustees ought to be part of the donating to whatever level. And so I think at some point we should talk about that.
Okay, get that one on the agenda. We'll see how the January agenda looks. And I know, like you said, it may be a little bit of a touchy subject, but it's part of making the commitment to being a trustee, in my opinion, too. So, any other suggestions? Well, if not, I wish you all a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in January. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to all.
Be well, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.